Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's topic. We are jumping right into a pretty fascinating masterclass on decoding PPK, or Palmoplantar Keratoderma. It's a condition that might seem pretty straightforward on the surface, but as we're going to uncover, it actually holds some incredible secrets about human genetics and systemic health. We're going to break down the science, the symptoms, and the deep underlying mysteries of this condition.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to imagine you're a doctor. A patient walks into your outpatient department, and they've got this distinctly thick, yellowed skin on their palms and the soles of their feet. Right away, your immediate instinct might be to think, oh, well, they just work with their hands, it's probably simply a callosity. Or maybe you suspect a fungal infection like tinea, or perhaps psoriasis. But what if it's not? What if that thick skin is actually the very first clue to a much deeper inherited syndrome? I'm talking about the kind of syndrome that could even predict heart disease or cancer. That right there is the diagnostic puzzle of PPK.
So here is our syllabus for today's Diagnostic Masterclass. First, decoding the condition. Second, hereditary versus acquired forms. Third, the diffuse, focal, and striate patterns. Fourth, syndromes and internal clues. And finally, diagnosis and treatment options.
Let's start with Section 1, decoding the condition.
So, what exactly are we dealing with? Well, Palmoplantar Keratoderma is a highly heterogeneous group of disorders, and the word keratoderma itself quite literally translates to a marked thickening of the skin's epidermis. Specifically, we're talking about the stratum cornea. That's the outermost layer of the skin, abnormally thickening over the palms and soles. And this happens due to fundamental defects in keratinization, which is just the natural process by which our skin cells mature to form a protective outer barrier.
So why on earth does this defective keratinization actually happen? Well, the pathogenesis comes down to some core genetic mutations. These mutations affect absolutely critical structural proteins in the skin. Things like keratins, desmosomes, and connexins. You can kind of think of these proteins as the mortar holding the bricks of your skin cells together. When mutations pop up in common genes like KRT1, KRT9, or DSG1, that mortar essentially crumbles. It completely impairs the epidermal integrity. And how does the skin respond to this massive structural weakness? It goes into absolute overdrive. It results in hyperproliferation, rapidly producing extra layers of skin in a desperate attempt to protect itself, which is exactly what gives you that thick, yellow appearance.
Moving on to Section 2, hereditary versus acquired forms. And this brilliantly illustrates how genetics dictate the probability of inheriting PPK. If the condition is hereditary, it's caused by a gene abnormality and typically follows one of two main pathways. On one side, we have autosomal dominant inheritance. This means the condition is likely to show up in literally every generation of a family. If just one parent is affected, there's a 50% chance each child is going to inherit it. On the other hand, we have autosomal recessive. Now this one is less common because both parents must pass on the abnormal gene. People with just one affected gene are simply carriers. They won't actually show symptoms themselves, but they can definitely pass it down the line.
But here's the catch. PPK isn't always genetic. A patient can develop this condition entirely as a result of a change in their health or their environment. Inflammatory skin conditions like widespread plaque psoriasis or chronic eczema, those can definitely cause an acquired keratoderma. So can severe infections like crusted scabies. We also have to be on high alert for environmental toxins like arsenic exposure, certain medications, or even an internal malignancy that's secretly causing the skin to react. Pinning down this origin story is absolutely critical for how we proceed with treatment.
All right, Section 3, diffuse, focal, and striate.
Whenever a specialist looks at those thickened palms, they are actively running through an exact mental checklist. Step 1, which we just covered, is it inherited or acquired? Step 2, what is the visual pattern? And step 3, is it syndromic? Meaning, is it associated with other internal organ issues? Right now, let's zoom in on step 2.
To categorize that visual pattern, doctors rely heavily on the DFS mnemonic: diffuse, focal, and striate. I really want to anchor you to this critical acronym so you don't get lost in the sea of complex medical terminology that usually surrounds this topic. If you can remember DFS, you essentially understand how doctors read the skin. Let's see how this builds out into a proper diagnostic framework.
Breaking down those DFS patterns, we start with diffuse. If it's diffuse, the entire palm and sole are involved, and it often presents as a symmetrical, yellow, waxy hyperkeratosis. We see this in the Una-Thos type, which is linked to those KRT1 and KRT9 genes.
Now, if it's focal, the thickening is located mostly on pressure-bearing areas. It's really fascinating because mechanical stress actually dictates where the focal keratoderma forms, like we see in conditions like Pachyonychia congenita. And finally, striate PPK presents as linear hyperkeratosis. We're talking actual distinct lines of thickened skin, which is frequently linked to desmoplakin gene mutations.
Moving into Section 4, Syndromes and Internal Clues.
This is honestly where things get incredibly intense, because this is where the skin literally acts as a window to internal medicine. When we talk about syndromic PPK, what we mean is that the keratoderma, that thick skin on the hands and feet, is merely a superficial marker. It is a massive red flag waving on the outside, actively warning us of a much deeper, sometimes life-threatening systemic abnormality on the inside. Now, what's really interesting about this is how insanely specific these genetic connections actually are. Think about Naxos disease. A mutation in the plakoglobin gene doesn't just cause striated PPK and woolly hair. It connects directly to arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. That is a very serious heart disease. Or take Hall-Evans syndrome, where the keratoderma is essentially a marker for a huge risk of esophageal carcinoma. Then you have Papillon-Lefebvre syndrome, linked to the CTSC mutation, where patients suffer from severe periodontitis, often tragically losing their teeth before they even reach adulthood. The skin is quite literally mapping out the internal health of the patient.
And let's look a little closer at Vohwinkel syndrome. This specific condition has incredibly vivid visual markers. A doctor is going to look for distinct starfish keratosis, literally starfish-shaped areas of thickened skin. But even more severe, it can cause something called pseudo-anhum. These are super tight fibrous bands that form around the fingers or toes, and they can tragically lead to the auto-amputation of the digits. All of this while being internally linked to sensory neural deafness. It's a prime example of how interconnected the body is.
Which brings us to our final section, Diagnosis and Treatment Options. Investigating this today requires a heavily multidisciplinary toolkit. It all starts with a very thorough clinical and dental exam. Doctors will literally sit down and map out a family pedigree to trace those dominant or recessive traits we talked about earlier. They'll also do a skin biopsy to check the histopathology, for instance, looking for epidermolysis, which is the physical breakdown of the epidermal layers. But the investigation absolutely goes beyond dermatology. Depending on the clues the skin provides, they might order genetic testing or even refer the patient out to cardiology for an ECG and echo, or to gastroenterology for an upper GI endoscopy.
So, once it's officially diagnosed, how is it treated? So the crucial point to remember is that because we cannot currently cure the underlying genetic mutations, treatment is heavily focused on managing symptoms and improving the patient's quality of life. The arsenal starts pretty simply. Avoid friction and use generous emollients. From there, doctors employ keratolurics to actively soften the thickened skin. For the much more severe cases, topical or even systemic oral retinoids like acitretin are brought in, though those definitely require careful ongoing monitoring of liver function and lipids. And in extreme cases, like the pseudo-anhum we just saw in Vohwinkel syndrome, surgical debridement or correction becomes necessary.
I really want to highlight this specific number, 20 to 40%. This represents the concentration of urea that's very often prescribed. When used alongside things like 6% salicylic acid and lactic acids, a 20 to 40% urea formulation acts as an amazing frontline keratolytic agent. It works by physically breaking down that hardened, hyperproliferated protein, making the skin significantly less noticeable and just far more comfortable for the patient day to day.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We started all of this by looking at thick, yellow skin on the palms and soles. But what we've discovered is that this is so much more than just a callosity. If a simple change in a skin protein, literally just a slight genetic mutation in keratin or plakoglobin, can accurately predict right ventricular heart disease or esophageal cancer or childhood tooth loss, what else is our skin desperately trying to tell us about the deep, mysterious interconnectedness of the human body? It really changes how you look at the surface of things, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope you never look at skin exactly the same way again.